and, you know, 80% of the electric bill is the air conditioner. You pass by there, they're all old air conditioning systems. The windows probably are an issue there too, so, you know, if they could be, no, you know, again, not participating in that program, so don't care who they get it from, it's not from me. But, you know, certainly that's some, you know, that's my contribution of expertise there, that they can, how they can reduce their energy bill. And I think ID has rebates on that as well, so let's try and help them and be creative in helping them, like you said. Okay, so we have business items. Consideration to adopt an agency agenda policy. Jennifer, was that different from the next item on the?
Yes. One is strictly dealing with how an agenda is prepared and how items get on the agenda. And then the second item is regarding council member procedures, voting procedures, and the actions that take place at the actual council meeting. And as far as the agenda policy, you know, there's not much regarding legal aspects to it. We already comply with the law in that we post the agenda 72 hours in advance of regular meetings. We properly put and notice the items on the agenda. So the agenda policy is strictly that. It's a policy of how items get on there. And there's been some interest in having a written policy so that when questions arise, we have a written policy to go to and say, you know, this item can be on the agenda or it needs to go through this process or something like that. So what I did is I drafted something based on a compilation of other cities' agenda policies and gave you a draft. I believe the city manager also gave you some form of an agenda policy that he got from another city, and you know, it's up to the council and whether you want to adopt something like this. This particular agenda policy was set up so that the agenda and materials would be published and posted and given to the council members a week prior to the council meeting. That's the endeavor. It may not always happen, but that's the endeavor, and it also was to make sure that all the materials are posted on the city's website a week in advance too. You know, obviously things come up and that may not happen, but that's kind of the intent behind this policy.
Part of what we also wanted to do was be able to give backup material on the web so that you not only get the agenda, but you get all the backup material. Similar to IID does the same thing, and other cities do the same thing. So we want it to be more participatory and more transparent so that you have immediate access to that. And also the media can have access to whatever's in the backup material as well. So if anything needs to come out, people are interested that they can come out. I had one item here. Item 3, agenda item request. If there's a question, any council member may place an item on an upcoming council agenda by either submitting a written request for city manager name and letters in the agenda deadline, which includes proof that one other council member has consented to that being placed on the agenda, includes any proposed background material for the item. What is proof? Can you define it?
It's up to you guys how you want to define it. Essentially, you can just say, you know, I've spoken to Councilmember Romero and he's agreed, and then, you know, if Ralph feels like he wants to call the other council member, or if you want to submit an email or something like that. I think it's up to you guys on how detailed you want this to be.
Kim?
Mr. Mayor, I noticed that on that paragraph as well, any member of the public can address the council on an item during the public comment portion of the agenda. Isn't that just the opposite of what we do?
Right.
So public comment is allowed per law, and so my intent was that if someone came into public comment, they have their 3 minutes, they can bring up an item that's not on the agenda, and if the council feels that that's an item that they want placed on a future agenda, then you'll direct staff at that time to place that item on, you know, the next agenda or a month from now, as opposed to members of the public just bringing something to Luli and saying, put and then she's not certain how, to approach that. Does she put that on the agenda? Does she get the approval of the mayor?
Why don't we make it more specific? Because this leaves kind of an open door. I think we need to be very specific. If there's an item to be placed on the agenda, there's a procedure. They can request it 13 days before, so we have a chance to see it. If you can clarify that section first, and if...
For a member of the public?
For example,
Okay.
maybe that might help.
Because we have, at the end of the agenda now, we began a process where we request items to be placed on the next agenda.
Right.
So I think that just leaves kind of a...
Well, and I think what I did in there was I included, for council members, you can either submit the request to the city manager, or you can do it at a council meeting. What we have happening is sometimes at the end of the council meeting, council members will say, we want this on an upcoming agenda, so then we put it on there. But other times, the Friday before the agenda comes out, a council member will call and say, put this on the agenda. So, we're trying to figure out how do we have a process so that all the items that the council members want will be placed on the agenda, and giving you two options. You either submit the request to Ralph in advance, or you do it at the actual council meeting, which is definitely going to give us the 2 weeks of advance notice to get it on the agenda. And then for the member of the public, they can come into public comment and say, we want this, this is an item we want on the council's future agenda. If three of you say, put it on the agenda next time, then we know.
Can you put that 3 council members requesting an item on the agenda to Ralph? That's how the procedure would be to place an item on the agenda. It's not written in here now. I think that has been practiced, but it wasn't here.
Actually, practice had been if a council member called in and said they wanted it on the agenda, it got put on the agenda, didn't have other council, exactly. I'm a little bit concerned about the 3 council members, just because then you tend to go to the Brown Act, and there could be a concern that if 3 council members are talking about an item outside the meeting. So I went with 2 members requesting an item, put it on the agenda, and that's
How
been
about
used.
doing the request of city manager to the acting mayor? I mean, I'm not mayor forever, so I don't care, but...
It could be done in that way. I think that would at least have the city manager as a middle person to then call the mayor and say, Mayor, are you in favor of it too?
I'm more concerned about what happens when it's not done through the procedure and not done here at the end of our council meeting when we request an item. That in between time, that something comes up and we're trying to, the agenda's been put together and they want to push it to be on the agenda. That shouldn't happen. There's a deadline.
Right, there's a deadline.
So there wouldn't be any last minute additions.
The only last minute additions under this have to be approved by the city manager and the mayor.
Last minute additions.
Right, so say we find out, we've already put out the agenda on Tuesday, and then on Friday, we get some type of either, the state tells us you need to approve this by next week. We get something regarding litigation that we have to have an immediate answer on. Something to that effect where we're still in our noticing period, we would have to call the city manager, call the mayor and say, allow us to put this on. So we have a situation to deal with emergencies.
And then we've had situations where one council member calls and says, I want this on the agenda. And then one of the other ones hears it's only on the agenda, then they call Louis and they tell Louis, well, I don't want this on the agenda. One does, one doesn't. And my response has been, hash it out and give us a final yes or no. Because it puts her in a bad situation.
That's why we want to make it clear so that 2 members requesting it to the city manager confers with the mayor at the time, or the mayor. Then council at the meeting can request it at the meeting.
So on the written, essentially we'll still have it on the agenda every time to say future agenda request.
Right.
And at that time,